Hello, everyone. It's Larry Kotlikoff with Economics Matters. I have a really special guest with me today, William. I call him Bill because I've called him always Bill from
Yeah.
forever. Bill Raduchel. Bill is uh, some combination of all the tech titans that we've got in our country because he's worked with all of them and he's uh, kind of instructed all of them and in some ways directed them and learned from them. And he's a technological whiz kid going way back. He's been an executive. Well, he started out as a professor of economics at Harvard for 10 years. Then he was an assistant dean at Harvard and Radcliffe. And the story about deans is that those who can't teach are deans, and those who can't, uh, uh, yeah, those who can't do are those who can't do teach, and those who can't uh, teach are deans. But Bill left Harvard as an assistant, his assistant deanship at Harvard and Radcliffe. And then he became an executive, very high level executive at the following companies: Ruckus Network, Sun Microsystems, AOL Time Warner, Xerox Corporation, McGraw-Hill. And he, in these roles, he got to interact and work with all kinds of people. And Bill's going to go through the entire list. Uh, maybe we can just have you kind of give us some idea of some of the people that you've interacted with, Steve Jobs and so forth. So, Bill, welcome to Economics Matters. Great to have you here. We're going to talk about your two terrific new books, uh, The Bleeding Edge, and the other book is the
A new technology
New
state.
Technology
State.
State. Yeah, the New Technology State, which is uh, kind of riffs off of The New Industrial State by Kenneth Galbraith. And Galbraith was a professor of Bill's at Harvard and a close friend of Bill's. So we're going to talk about these two books that just came out, The Bleeding Edge and The New Technology State by William Raduchel. So Bill, great to have you. Tell us a bit, just give us a teaser here about the people that you've interacted with. Just do a little name dropping for a bit here, and then we'll go on to talk about where you grew up and how you got into the world of technology, uh, starting, I guess, even at age 14.
You know, the, I just sort of, I didn't plan any of this really. It just happened. But along the way, I spent 11 years at Sun Microsystems. And younger people don't remember how powerful a force in the technology industry Sun was for 20 years. And I was there during the peak. I joined Sun in 1988 and left in 99. So I was there 12 years from 1 billion to 14 billion. And you couldn't do anything in the industry without running into us. So, I interacted with lots and lots of people. Didn't really interact much with Gates. I met him a few times. BALLMER I did because he was my student. Uh, and Steve Jobs I did because we did multiple deals with him in multiple places, and he was a fascinating creature to deal with. Eric Schmidt, who went on to grow Google to what it was as CEO, who was a colleague of mine at Sun. Um, I then went to work for Steve Case at AOL. I got to meet Jerry Levin, who was the CEO of Time Warner, and then Dick Parsons, who just died, ran afterwards. And so I spent my life growing up with technology largely with people who didn't understand it. Well, that was not true at Sun. or Steve Jobs understood it completely. Steve Case understood brilliantly how technology would play out with consumers. And it's just fascinating to watch how they did it. And they were very clever in how they exploited things. They both used supply side constraints. I mean, in 1995, Steve Case was shown Windows 95, which was a huge change for consumers. And
Mhm.
he said, wait a minute, this is going to be a success. So then he went and did a deal with Microsoft to put AOL on the home screen
Mhm.
so that when consumers turned it on Christmas morning, they would see something they could actually do. Because otherwise, they had to create a whole bunch of stuff which they didn't have. And
Right.
so he had it there. And then he told his network management team, okay, go out and buy every inbound modem in the United States. So in that day, you dial up to connect to AOL, and he bought all the inbound modems in the US. Not anybody could buy them, but there was a limited capacity for them, and he simply bought them up. I don't know,
He-
80%, 90% at least
And
by
then he
Christmas.
resold them or what?
What?
Then he resold them?
No, he just kept them for himself. And so when people wanted to get online, if they went to another service, they'd find that they couldn't get in, that they'd get a busy signal. Um, and
Well,
85% of the inbound modems were owned by AOL. I mean, it was brilliant, simple. Had he been wrong, the company would have been bankrupt because these were leases. You lease these lines, um, and they're very expensive. They ran on a mainframe computer. You could add more, but it took time because you needed a data center, you needed power, you needed HVAC, you needed this big switch at 5 ESS, and so there weren't any more. There were in a year. But for a year, AOL had a virtual monopoly on the inbound modems. And so anybody who wanted to get online, even if you liked another service better, you probably couldn't get on. And,
right.
you know, that's how the game's played.
So, and you've been around all kinds of these types of decisions by these major companies. But let's take you back to your birth in Michigan, is it?
Yeah, Michigan. I went to Michigan Technological University in my hometown. I mean, it really goes back even before college. If you're my age, you remember the Sputnik era, and the country panicked. And it panicked because it thought the Soviet Union was winning the space race and all the things that meant. And so the federal government, in particular, said, we have to educate everybody in STEM. And so in my ninth grade, I was pushed into all the 10th grade STEM classes. They just skipped ninth grade for me. And they did for the top 15% of the class or something. We were all pushed up. And then they sponsored institutes, and one of them was at Northern Michigan University. And I went there as my first away trip from home. I was what, it was between sophomore and junior years. And we learned abstract math, and we learned how to speed read, and we saw computers. And
Mhm.
back then, the computer we saw was a tube computer, an RCA vacuum tube computer, not transistor, that was firing anti-aircraft missiles out of KI Sartor Air Force Base. And what we remembered was that the operators made it, it's not politically correct to say it, but it's a statement of fact. They made it play Dixie and flash the rebel flag. Um, and that's what we saw as a computer. But we then got access to an IBM 1620. And the 1620 is the first transistor computer. It had 10,000 characters of memory. Your watch has gigabytes. I mean, 10,000, but you could do useful things with it. But that's when I started to learn computers. Then I went back, and I went back actually was full time at Michigan Tech, even though I was in high school. And I got access to their computer, and kids kept writing it. And so I ended up self-teaching myself most all of computer science because there was nobody there to teach me. I mean, this was all brand new and doing it. But then I decided to want to be an economist. So I went to Michigan State. And by going to Michigan State, I could graduate in a year. And because engineering had such a horrible course load.
In 1 year?
Well, but I had one full-time year at Michigan Tech. But
Mhm.
to graduate from Michigan Tech, you needed 250 credit hours. To graduate from Michigan State, you needed 180. So it was very doable. And then I ended up at Harvard and
So
pretty,
what year did you get to Harvard?
pardon,
What year did you get to Harvard?
65,
65. Okay.
65. And my second year, I was a scholarship student. I was a National Merit Scholar at Michigan State. Um, I could get work, and I ended up working for Mark Nurlov um, as a research assistant. Well, it turned out all that Mark needed was software. So I started writing software, and I kept writing software for decades. Uh,
I mean, by the time I arrived in 73, you had two major computer software programs, statistical programs. People are familiar with, probably MATLAB today or Stata or R, but
they
Bill,
were very economics oriented. And almost all statistical research at Harvard was done with them for a decade. And SCORE, which everybody used all over the country, it just had no competitors or no alternatives because it could handle millions of records. And nobody else could process millions of records at that time affordably on a computer.
yeah, I just want everybody who knows something about technology, everybody maybe in college or grad school is using R right now. I mean, imagine there was just one computer program that everybody's using for their statistical work, econometric work, uh, scientific work, and it was written, and there's one person who wrote it. Uh, well, we're talking about Bill Raduchel back in the late 60s, early 70s.
I mean, remember, you couldn't patent software at the time. The Supreme Court had not allowed it. So there was really no way to be paid. And the tradition was that software was given away. I shipped hundreds of reels of the software to people because that was the tradition of the time. The key algorithm in SCORE I published in the ACM journal on algorithms. And that was the secret sauce that made it all run so fast. But that was the tradition. It's so different than today, where software is the primary means of accumulating wealth.
So you could have become a gazillionaire had you sold this, but you just gave it away to the public for free.
You couldn't sell it. You couldn't. You had very weak protection.
I see. I got it.
So, but nobody did. I mean, no one was gonna. I mean, you gave away software. All right, it was a community good. It was a common good.
I'd like to talk to you about a really powerful financial planning tool to help you make smart retirement and other critical financial decisions. It's a tool that factors in all your financial data and shows you what you can sustainably spend every year for the rest of your life. That tool is my software company's Maxify Planner. It's incredibly powerful, it's accurate, and it's easy to use. Maxify takes the guesswork out of financial decisions at every stage of life. Its focus is on raising, de-risking, and sustaining your living standard. Maxify lets you run what-if scenarios to see how your finances will change in taking new jobs, buying a home, doing Roth conversions, retiring early, downsizing, investing more in the market, you name it. Knowing the impact of these decisions before you make them is the secret to making smarter decisions. And it's also the secret to what we all seek, which is financial peace of mind. So please visit Maxify.com today to start planning. That's Maxify with an I, Maxify.com, Maxify.com. Now let's get back to the podcast. So how do you go from, you're this brilliant software engineer, brilliant grad student working with Galbraith to becoming an associate assistant dean at
Yeah.
Harvard? Why did you just decide to go and do that?
Well, when my time at Harvard as an assistant professor ended, and I was told in advance that the department voted that software had no intellectual property value and would never be considered an academic decision and was worthless, and that I was like a glassblower to a chemist, in case I didn't want to feel good about myself. That was the message that I got a phone call from Jim Dusenberry to tell me that. So I was going to leave. I had associate professor offers at Berkeley Business School and Michigan State. Walter Adams, who had been my mentor at Michigan State, really wanted me to go back. But I was sort of comfortable. I then became a lecturer on economics, and I taught for 4 more years as a lecturer. And I was teaching graduate econometrics, and I was a principal assistant in Ec 1, Ec 10 then. And then I taught my own class in general ed on computers and society. So Harvard was they were getting high value for their money. Um, and um, so I was doing two jobs. I was doing full-time teaching and full-time assistant dean. And I knew Fred Jewett, who was the dean, and he said, maybe you can fix our computer systems. And so I did. And we cut our staff in half, improved turnaround, did everything. I mean, it was pretty simple, but you had to know. But what I learned is that if you don't know what you're doing, if you don't know what process you're fixing, you're not going to fix it right. And I had this enormous advantage that I knew the process inside out, and then I could program it accordingly. Most software is not anywhere near that good a match between um, the specifications and the actual work that's being done. So I did. I mean, I wrote 50,000, probably wrote 70,000 lines of PL1 to do all of that work during that time as well.
So you were Harvard's computer system for many years, even though you're an assistant dean. Am I getting that right?
Well, I was assistant dean for research and data processing, so it was part of my job.
Part of your job.
Yeah.
So, so,
But
so
but
then you
when
did.
when I left, they said, "Don't worry, we hired somebody. Um, you know, go off, have a great career." And then they called me up and said, "Can you bail us out?" And so for the next 2 years, I had to work part-time for the admissions office, bailing them out because they they thought they could hire somebody who could replace me. And I'm not egotistic. I mean, software skills are very scarce, and I'm very good. And yeah, I could do it, but somebody replacing me on the way I was doing it had to be able to understand the software better than the people that they could hire. Harvard never appreciated software skills.
They probably
World
still
doesn't appreciate them today. I mean, I think the biggest thing in the most interesting and seismic thing of the year so far is Meta offering $100 million sign-on packages for engineers. It's $100 million if you come and work here. I mean, that's what software is worth. That's a smart move on Zuckerberg's part. It makes perfect sense. But the rest of the world looks at it and thinks this is just insane. But
yeah.
it isn't. That's what these people are worth.
So Bill, take us through leaving Harvard to all these different high
Okay.
level positions. Give us a quick tour of your career, and then we want to get to your books and your, vision for the
The
age
world.
of technology. Yeah, the world.
Um, I I went to data resources. I went to the Institute for Defense Analyses when I left because we had a squabble over compensation, and they said they didn't need me and that I wasn't very valuable, and they weren't going to give me any pay. And I said, okay, then I'm gone. And uh, I ended up at IDA where I had a security clearance, I had a position, and it was easy to do, but I never saw it as other than the transition. And then I went to data resources, which Otto Eckstein at Harvard had funded and had created. And if you look online, you can find a lot of dirt about the, Harvard's decision not to promote me and how it intertwined with Otto. And Otto was chairman of the committee that recommended I not be promoted at the same time that he was chairman of data resources, which was giving me an offer. And some people saw that as a conflict of interest, especially John Kenneth Galbraith. And so all the letters are online. They're quite interesting for me to read. I didn't read them until 2 years ago. I obviously didn't even know they existed.
He
Uh,
was,
but I joined there, and again, what I really am, Larry, is a deep generalist. I've always known economic statistics, um, deals, and technology. And it isn't that they're better people in any one of them, but there are very few people that have the same depth of skill across multiple silos. And that's what's really mattered my whole career.
so DRI, which was a big deal company,
Yeah.
at least to economists back then and to people in the business world, because it
Uh,
was
it got
using
bought for
computers.
103 million by McGraw-Hill, and it was the biggest technology buyout in history at that time. 103 million. I mean, peanuts today, but and then I
Do you
went.
think Otto, by the way, do you think Otto did you, let's say Otto had mixed motives here, but do you think he did you a favor by kicking you out of Harvard and bringing you over to DRI? Maybe that was actually for your benefit in retrospect.
Economically, surely. Economically, surely.
Mhm.
I didn't particularly want to leave, but I mean, it's off from what this podcast is about. But I made the decision to leave, not based on money, but based on no, I didn't want to be there when I was 45.
Yeah, yeah.
And so then DRI, I got promoted to being to corporate and ran their software product, which was called EPS, which was brilliant for the time, Bob Lacey. And from there, I got promoted to McGraw-Hill. Again, it was a job that I was supposed to be, a nice summation of it was a product fairy godmother, was to go around the corporation and find projects that needed my help and give it. It didn't really appeal to me, but I was then explained to me that at McGraw-Hill, if you're offered a promotion and you don't take it, you'll never get another one. So, okay, once I had that explained to me, I took the position. I then became senior vice president and chief scientist. And that was the job. But then a reorg occurred, and a rival came in, and he used his clout, and I was forced out. Um, I went to Xerox and then spent 3 years at Xerox as the in-house software expert. And
Mhm.
I was in the corporate strategy staff for a while. And then one day, Xerox had an odd structure, a very odd structure. The CEO did not control pricing, marketing, product specs. Uh, the CEO of a division didn't control those. He had a subordinate who controlled them, but that subordinate had a direct line to another person who today we would call chief product officer. So today this structure is not as rare as it was then. But anyway, Lyndon, who played that role, came in and said that he wanted to know how I thought about moving to California, and I knew what the job was. And I said, You just told me I was going to be here for 5 years, so I bought a house 2 weeks earlier." And he said, "Well, no, I was just talking about it." And then 5 minutes later, I'm walking down the hall to my boss's office, And the current David Kearns, the CEO, comes out of the men's room and goes, "Bill, so happy to hear you're going to California. That's great. Just what we need." So I went and found Lyndon again and go, "Who else knew about this idea?" And he goes, "Well, we told David." Again, you don't have much choice. So I ended up going out. And then I ran, Xerox had a workstation division that came out of Park. It was a brilliant product. It lost 100 million a year. And I learned a very important business lesson from that. Your best customers buy your worst products. That's why you have to have quality control. And Xerox best customers bought this product. And if Xerox shut it down, they would quit buying Xerox everywhere. So I figured out how to close it down and take care of them and do that and save them 100 million a year. Um, but they kept promising promotion and didn't offer it. And I finally said, well, I'm going to go to Sun. And on the last day of work, my very last day, uh, David uh, Allaire called me and offered me a 250% increase in salary, which was high. I mean, but I said it's too late. And so I went to Sun. And at Sun, I was in what was the backwater. I was the first VP of planning, trying to figure the company ran, the joke at the billion in revenue party was the difference between the Boy Scouts and Sun is that the Boy Scouts have adult supervision. I mean, it was wild and woolly. And then we almost went bankrupt in 1989. And the CEO, the CFO, took a position at Apple for $1 million sign-on grant. And he left immediately. He resigned at 2 and was gone at 2:05. And at 2:10, I was the acting CFO. And I got to sort all that out. And then,
So you're chief financial officer of Sun Microsystems. Sun at this point is one of the biggest
yeah,
computer companies, software companies in the world at this point, right?
yeah, yeah,
But
yeah.
it's in trouble, and you're now the
CFO.
chief financial officer, not technology officer, but financial officer.
Branch officer. Yeah, that's what I was. I then became the chief information officer as well. So I was both CFO and CIO. That made reorganizing the company really simple. And but I did that
You
for,
took it from like a 1 billion to a $14 billion company in a
well,
couple of
I
years.
left before. I mean, I won't. I eventually became VP of HR, and
Mhm.
then I was always VP of M&A. I did every M&A deal, every major commercial deal for Sun for for 12 years. I was the deal guy, and so it was a great time, and I was busy. I was flying all the time. Probably has destroyed my health in my older ages, but I mean, I went to Japan 200 times. I went to London 200 times. I mean, we were a global company and very thin, very thin. I mean, we had no regional management. So,
Geez.
you know,
So, okay, so Sun, and then you go from Sun to where?
Steve Case called me and
This is
wanted
AOL.
me to
Yeah.
do, wanted me to reinvent AOL for broadband.
Mhm.
That wasn't the first thing he was going to do, but that was what he wanted me to do. So I then moved to Washington. Then we bought AOL Time Warner. And that was just, I mean, the true story. I mean, there's more of the true story in the book than is out there in the press because AOL, Time Warner took over the press coverage and they were very good at it. And they always wrote it up as if they bought AOL and it was a mistake. Well, they didn't. We bought them and it was still a mistake. But we bought them. They didn't buy us. And but we agreed on a merger of equals, and that was a disaster. Never do a merger of equals because when there's disagreement, and they didn't understand software and they didn't understand online, and that I mean it was a disaster for everybody, uh, mostly the people. I mean,
So now, I mean, we're basically kind of walking through your memoir, The Bleeding Edge. By the way, why is it called The Bleeding Edge?
well, because it's always been said in technology that you can choose to live on the bleeding edge, which is on immature technology. And you bleed. If you live on the bleeding edge, you're bleeding because you're on immature technology, where it's going, not where it was. So, and Sun was always on the bleeding edge. AOL was not. AOL
So,
had to be more central.
so a bleeding edge is a good thing to be on the bleeding edge.
Well, it's risk reward, Larry.
I see.
Higher risk, higher reward.
Right. Okay. And okay, so we have this merger, and then what happens to Bill Raduchel?
Well, then Steve Case gets fired, and that meant that I had to be fired because anybody from AOL was now an enemy and a parasite that had to be destroyed. And they were very effective at it, getting rid of it. Um, John Miller, who became the CEO of AOL, walked in right after Dick had fired me and said, well, core to my strategy is Bill, and everything is built around him. And he goes, well, I just fired him. So then I got hired back as a consultant, which annoyed uh, Time Warner incredibly. I mean, they just couldn't. They said that they wanted to deduct it from my severance pay, and I go, well, then that's not compensation, so I'm not doing it. And so I did some time for that. Then I was CEO of a startup that tried to save the music industry from college piracy, and it had two flaws, which we didn't anticipate. One is that Apple would enter, and that Apple absolutely supported piracy. They said they didn't, but the statistics showed that 90% of pirated music was pirated from Apple because you could store the music. They needed people to have lots of songs or they wouldn't want an iPod. An iPod with 10 songs is a useless device. You want an iPod with 1,000 songs or 2,000 songs. And so Apple had to support piracy, and they had to say they didn't. They put "don't steal" in the box. But then if you used iTunes and you were in a dorm, you could see everybody else's music and just drag and drop it into your music. So yeah, yes, they said don't steal, but then they made it very easy to steal. And if you didn't steal, who would buy an iPod? I mean, you weren't going to have an iPod with, you know, 100 songs. It just didn't make any sense. Uh, so to sell it, and besides it was for a long time, several years, it was the number one way that boys tried to get favor from girls is they would give them songs from their iPod. So uh, it was impossible, and the universities we thought cared about it, and they didn't. I was talking to the vice president and student affairs officer at the American University, and she said, "You're right. Stopping, you know, copyright theft is something that we would like to stop. It comes after alcohol abuse, drug abuse, sexual violence, and then, three or four other things." And she said, and so I never get to it. Okay.
Want more money, less risk, and a better life? Buy Money Magic, a new book by Lawrence Kotlikoff, Boston University economist, personal finance expert, and best-selling author. Whether it's education, career, marriage, housing, investing, retirement, Social Security, IRA, or 401k decisions, Money Magic delivers scores of secrets to raise your living standard. Financial journalist Jane Bryant Quinn says Money Magic is a must-read. Nobel laureate George Akerlof says Money Magic is quite probably the best financial advice book ever written. Financial guru John Malden says, you'll love this amazing book. It's full of wit, wisdom, and startling paths to a better financial life. And columnist Scott Burns calls Money Magic a funny, brilliant read, offering wildly powerful, unconventional choices that can literally change your life. Get Lawrence Kotlikoff's Money Magic today at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and independent booksellers.
So, so here you've had, by the way, when did you run into Steve Jobs up to this point in
Oh
your,
yeah, I mean, at Sun, I did multiple deals with Steve, and
uh,
I was in the room when we did the deal. Paul Vidic was the lead with deal that put Warner Music on iPods. The first deal to put Warner Music, and so I was there watching him. I mean,
and what was your impression of Jobs? You told me, but I think other people would be interested since he was such, an important figure in technology.
I mean, Steve was very smart. He knew what he wanted. He could write contracts better than any lawyer. He was a very good engineer, even though he didn't ever have any engineering background. And I mean, the my deepest interaction with him came when Sun decided we would buy Next, which was his computer company at the time. So we're negotiating, and he knows I'm the deal guy, and he knew Scott wasn't doing it. So I get an invitation to breakfast. So Steve invites me to breakfast with his wife and kids on Sunday morning. Now, there was no business reason for me to have breakfast with his kids and wife on a Sunday morning, but he would go to any length. And on Tuesday, I went to see him, and his assistant said, "Mr. Jobs is in the boardroom." And I walk in, and the boardroom was elegant. Even though it was a startup, his boardrooms were always elegant. It was all solid mahogany and big mahogany table. And he's at the end. There's only one light on him, a spotlight. I had to sit in the dark. And I sit down and I tried to make pleasantry about a Pixar movie. Shut me off. He said, "What's the number?" What number? Yeah. What number? What are you prepared to pay for Next? I said, 283 million. He goes, "That's right. Congratulations. That's the right number. If I was Sun and I was going to buy Next, that's what I would pay." I want 400. Got up and left. That was it. Didn't say goodbye. Didn't say I mean, just,
He just had breakfast with you, but no, okay. And then what happens? He caves, right?
no,
In
no,
the
no. He sold to Apple for 400.
Oh, well,
No, he wouldn't. He didn't cave. He wouldn't. He'd made a promise to the vice chair of Canon when Canon invested, and they invested at 400 million. And he promised the guy that he would not have them take a loss. So that was the formula. So we had, he wasn't he was honorable.
mhm.
I have friends who work with him much more closely, and he's, very interesting guy. I mean, one friend was key to his success, and then one day he fired him and never talked to him again. And yet everything Steve built was built on his work. I mean,
Do you want to mention who that was or is?
I don't. I mean, it was Avi Tavanian, but who created the software? He was the software genius that created everything.
Why do you think Jobs did that?
It's just Steve. I mean, I mean,
Ruthless. Okay.
I mean,
So it's,
he didn't lead by being. I mean, he was famous for taking 3-hour walks to convince you. But and obviously the people who work with him idolized him. But you knew that one day the the idolization is gone and you're gone.
so how do you, I mean, these personalities, I mean, there's more to your career, but and it's all in this book, The Bleeding Edge. But these are lessons about technology, lessons about the history of technology, lessons about uh, business decision making and what it takes to make a great company, what a business leader should be focused on, key things. So it's a book that everybody should definitely read. It's fascinating. There's so many fascinating elements to this book, as well as the other book, The New Technology Frontier. But what do you make of the people that here you are,
The
Bill,
people who drive tech are often
Bill
very,
Raduchel, and you're being treated. I mean, I realized in my first year in grad school who Bill Raduchel was. I mean, this is
yeah.
like the smartest guy in the world, and we got technology coming, and he knows all about it. And he's written this fantastic program that everybody's using in our program. And he's also a nice guy, a friendly guy. And I was kind of like, you were like a hero of sorts, not in terms of what I wanted to emulate in terms of my own career, because I didn't have like your skills, but just in terms of a person. And here you run into all kinds of, it sounds like pretty awful personalities along the way, um, as
But
well as great personalities.
I mean, the tech world, um, people is driven by people. I mean, tech world is all about people. It's not about technology. I mean, the most important chapter of the new technology state is the chapter on Halstead length.
On what, Stephen?
Halstead length.
Okay.
Maurice Halstead was a professor of computer science at um, Purdue 30, 40 years ago. And he was fascinated by a question others have. Why are some developers so much better than other developers? And he developed a bunch of heuristics to measure essentially the capacity of the brain. And there is a theory which works, but it may not be right, that memories are stored as organic molecules and you can open them. And when you open them, you know everything in it. But if it's not open, you have to search for it to find it. And the average human has 7 sockets where you can connect up one of these organic molecules. And the question is, how long can the organic molecules be? And he was very modest. He called this the Halstead length because he was modest. Um, and he did a study and he had an arbitrary metric. And he found that the average person had a Halstead length of approximately 250, which means that your memories, your knowledge is broken up into chunks that are 250 long. And that's roughly 50 lines of Fortran, which was the programming language of the time, 1 page of code. When he got to the great developers, their Halstead length was 65,000. So now you have a brain attribute that varies not by 2 to 1, 3 to 1, 4 to 1. They all vary by that amount. This is by 260 to 1. And so if you're a great programmer, I assure you, you have a great Halstead length. So did Mozart. So did Michelangelo. So did Shakespeare. Because it's all the same activity, but you have these very long Halstead lengths. Now, there is something about people with very long Halstead lengths that they also are not always normal. Uh, and they tend to have a lot of other quirks. And technology is you learn to put up with the quirks.
Let's talk about retirement for a minute. It's something Americans think about regularly. Ask yourself, how financially secure do you really feel? Do you have enough money to retire? How much is really enough? And if you don't have enough money, how can you possibly find that extra money before you do retire? These are all tough questions. My retirement software, Maxify Planner, is the powerful online planning tool that takes the guesswork out of retirement. It weighs your assets against your fixed expenses to calculate how much you can safely spend every year for the rest of your life based on when you decide to retire. And it shows you safe ways to find more money. Maxify makes a complicated problem like retirement planning simple. It's accurate, easy to use, and produces what you really seek, peace of mind. So make the smart choice and visit Maxify.com today. Don't miss this opportunity. That's Maxify with an I, Maxify, Maxify.com. Now let's get back to the podcast. How did you had to hire a lot of people. How did you kind of sense their Halstead length in when you look at their product, their work product, or just have a conversation or?
Well, there are a lot of, I mean, companies have a lot of tests now that are trying to do that. Unfortunately, there's a company now which builds an agentic AI tool that takes the test for you. So, so you pass. And it's, these raise tens of millions of dollars with that test. But it's elusive. It's elusive. But you know a great programmer when you meet them. The way they talk, the way they talk about things, how do they structure problems. But if you think about it, there's nothing. If you've got a Halstead length of 65,000, you have to break up a problem into chunks of 65,000. Other people are breaking it up into chunks of 250. So pretty soon they're overwhelmed by chunks and they have to start building layer on layer on layer to try to get command of it. And even if they do, they have this complexity of having so many of them. And so software geniuses are just high Halstead. Some of the best software people I've ever worked with were musicians. And they could play back a symphony for you. I mean, it is a core attribute. I don't even know that it's a skill. I don't know. We don't know where it comes from.
So this new technology, I mean, here we are talking about human capacity, brain capacity, and at the same time, we've got uh, your new book on the technology frontier, the new technology frontier. Where do you see humans, the human AI or smart machine interaction proceeding here? Do you think we're always?
AI is just software. So this is not new. This is just a next point on a line. I mean, it's software written by software,
Yeah.
but it's just software in the end, and it has all the quirks and all the benefits of software. And it costs a lot of money to create these LLMs, and we're investing
Large language models for
a
everybody.
large language model. Yeah, it costs billions, soon trillions of dollars that we're investing in data centers and copper and heating and all the other things the data center needs, but they need electricity. And we're not sure how we're going to provide all the electricity. And it has to be the highest quality electricity. It can't be interruptible. It has to be absolutely clean. And it's going to be a huge expense, and that will eventually put some limit to this. Yeah, a lot of stuff will. Yeah, if you're at the bottom half of the cognitive scale, there are going to be challenges. I mean, some of the jobs that, you know, mowing lawns, that job is rapidly becoming AI. You wouldn't think about that, but it's a job. I did see a study that did an analysis of corporate jobs and concluded that the most suitable job for AI replacement was CEO, because what the CEO should do is pretty regimented, and you could easily replace the CEO with AI. And in fact, I don't know, do you know what a DAO is? DAO?
Go ahead. Tell me.
Distributed Administrative Organization.
Okay.
It is a company where the boss is software. There is no human at the top. There's software at the top. And there are DAOs that are out there, and they are incorporated and they run, and their bylaws say that the DAO decides.
Well,
And
so,
Yeah, I mean, so this is happening. I mean, it isn't.
We just had, I mean, I just want to do two things. One is I just mentioned some of the chapter titles in the new technology state, which is it starts out with the age of the algorithm, Facebook's angry invisible hand, data is the new oil, Halstead length, answer seeking, abstraction layers, the declining relevance of neoclassical economics, technology disruptor in chief. Right now, we're talking about that. Algorithmic scale, the social rate of discount, the end of privacy, and the rise of surveillance, media and technology, the new politics, the new technology state. Wow. So each of these things are all interconnected, but they're also all quite, they're kind of a book by themselves. And then you got a conclusion, where do we go now? So today, I think it came out in CNN that we have, I guess, Elon Musk's new chat, whatever bot, is spewing out anti-Semitic statements just out of the blue. I've heard of other situations where some of these models, generative AI, where these things are trying to think on their own. If you feed them some extra code, they start going bananas.
An LLM is a child. It starts as a child. It learns from what it reads and processes. A lot of the world is not good. And depending on what it reads and what reinforcement it gets, yeah, that's going to happen. And I mean, the worst story that scared me was prior 24, I guess, is that the movie that got Biden to move on regulating AI was Mission Impossible. That after he saw the last year's Mission Impossible, he walked out of the meeting and said, "We've got to move on AI." Well, AI as portrayed in that movie is really purely fictional. I mean, you can't have an AI running in a submarine with no power source at the bottom of the Bering Sea. I mean, it's just nuts. Um, and
It's not, I mean, you're not saying it's infeasible, you're saying it's nuts to let it happen.
no, there's got to be a power source.
Yeah,
An AI that powerful would need a nuclear power plant to be running it. I mean, the brain is 50 watts.
mhm.
Brain is 50 watts. These AI, one NVIDIA chip takes 2,900 watts. One chip. And Elon Musk has 100,000 of them in the Grok data center. So your brain is 50 watts. He's got 100,000, 29,000 watt chips. I mean, the power difference is enormous. You can't make every decision. If we want to make every decision using these tools, our power consumption is going to go up, a billion times. I mean, it's just,
So you think a lot of this stuff is hyped relative
it's
to,
all hype. I mean, hype is how you get valuation right now. I mean, when we introduced email, I actually used to have to go and give talks on how do you run a company with email. Believe it or not, I had a paper on it and I delivered it multiple times to people. Email. It took a decade for email to penetrate the corporation.
Mhm.
Software never replaces a job, in my experience. It replaces fractions of jobs. And that becomes the challenge, is then how do you reorganize to capture those fractions? And it's very difficult. It's very difficult.
So the new technology state, uh, take us do a little comparison with the new industrial state of Galbraith. And maybe say a few words about Galbraith, because you guys were very close. A lot of
Yeah.
people don't know John Kenneth Galbraith was, one of the towering intellectuals of the last century. And very dry sense of humor. I guess he worked in the JFK's administration, Kennedy administration, and a brilliant person, a brilliant economist, but also a big thinker. So the new industrial state was, about society and how it's going to fare with that. But also, Bill, you're trying to emulate this masterful work of Galbraith. Uh, Tell us the parallels and tell us the differences here.
I mean, what he saw was the technology was going to transform America in every way, shape, or form. And that's what the book is about. But technology was hardware. And he wrote the definitive book for hardware. But this is all software. And that's a very different thing. So yes, it was inspired by that. He was a great mentor, he was a great friend, a great advisor, and very smart. And he was constantly interested in where technology was going. And I was walking through the new technology state with Paul Dacre, and Paul was the editor-in-chief of the Daily Mail in London. And so every day, um, 20% of Britain read him. Um, as he said to me one day, if I call number 10 Downing Street, the Prime Minister, I can't promise you that the Prime Minister would pick up the phone, but I can promise you he'd call me back within an hour. Uh, and we were talking about it, and he looked at me and he said, Bill, this is going to be a revolution. You can't do this to society. You can't push this fast, this far. And I think we see some of that. I mean, look, I have some unique suggestions at the end of the book that I think people ridicule sometimes, but like I think we should tax market cap. I think every company should pay a tax on their market cap once it hits, I don't know, 100 billion, 500 billion, a trillion. And if that's so you got market-based antitrust, you force the companies to break themselves up. And that's better for society than having these behemoths that sit astride everything and do that. I would put in a tax on rents. Ricardo believed that you should take all rents, and a lot of these things are rents. They're not wages. And I think we got to take steps to address this. You
So you're worried about inequality, basically. When you talk about revolution, you're talking about all the potential displaced workers uh, not being able to afford maybe to buy what the technology can supply. Is that kind of the
Yeah,
conundrum?
I mean, in 2008, the IRS faced a dilemma. They didn't have 10 digits in the income field. It's COBOL code. And when the COBOL code was written in 1956, they thought people could earn millions. The idea that people could earn a billion um, was unthinkable. So we had three people, I think, in 2008 that made over $1 billion in a calendar year. I think we now have hundreds.
I think we have about 3,000 billionaires in our
Yeah,
country.
but this is in a single year. So
Okay.
you're right. You're right. But I mean, I think it's hundreds in a single year. But I mean, I don't, it's very difficult to maintain a society. And I do worry about inequality. I think inequality will destroy the country. Uh, you know, but we don't
What,
have we don't have a government that's worrying about
can you connect this concern to what's going on politically right now? Do you see, I mean,
Trump, Trump is a complete reaction to everything that's discussed in the new technology state. Not paying attention to what's going on. I mean, if you're in the bottom half of the cognitive distribution, maybe a little bit higher, you've just seen yourself being squeezed for the last 10 years, maybe 20. And the people who are elite are getting benefits. And it's incredible as there are more of them and more things are built for them, it's more and more obvious to people that there are a lot of people who are getting very wealthy while they're not. And they see that, the world is stacked against them. And, I think there's, like I'm basically a conservative Republican, but I think that, or what we used to be a Republican anyway, but the you can't let inequality get this much out of hand.
So, so a whole different fiscal system, a whole different tax system, antitrust system. That's
I would, yeah, the tax system, I would put an excise tax on tax advantaged income,
yeah.
which would include um, uh, capital gains. No, but I mean, I would do one rate to 5 million, another rate to 50 billion, and another rate over 500 million. And the first rate's low, but the last rate's high. We can argue forever about what the rate should be, 10, 20, 30. But that's, I mean, and I would do a tax on market cap to make companies have to break themselves up.
Mhm. Meanwhile, we just had this new tax law, well, new or continuation of the prior tax law. At the same time, we see Medicaid being cut with 11 million people being put out of their health insurance, health coverage. So I'm not sure, you know, that we have an administration that's, that might have attracted uh, the the people that are feeling left out, but it's not clear that the decisions are being made in their interest at the end of the day. Uh,
I mean, but all right, I mean, doesn't mean that, yeah, cutting illegal immigrants out of it. Um, I don't know that that's unpopular among lower income people. I don't think they want to see their money going to illegal immigrant. I mean, yeah, we'll see. I mean, it's a political gamble. Uh,
let's go. So, Bill, this has been terrific. I want everybody to go quickly to Amazon. Can you get it at Amazon or somewhere your local bookstore?
Kindle copy of New Technology State is $1. And
Okay.
the bleeding edge is $5. Um,
And
so hard copies there's costs, but the Kindle copies are very cheap.
yeah, and these are really important books and really, going to bring you up to the leading edge. The bleeding edge will bring you to the leading edge.
I mean, I,
Uh,
I wrote the bleeding edge because after I wrote the first one, there's a street cred probability. What street cred do you have to write this? So I had to write something that showed that I had at least some street cred to be able to write the book.
well, I knew I've known for over 50 years that you had incredible street cred, and
Okay.
uh, it's just beginning as far as I can tell. Uh, it's just growing. Let's put it that way.
Okay. Yeah, maybe I'll write another book. Tom and I are talking about it. I mean, like AI, I mean, look, I mean, it's not, in 2018, I think it is, maybe 2019, the Air Force brought in their 5 best pilots and they set them up in a simulator against AI. And AI shot them all down. They
Oh,
didn't win one sortie.
geez.
Uh,
That, yeah,
and a simple reason. AI can fly the plane at the limits of the plane. Humans can fly it at the limits of the human.
right.
And-
Well,
I mean, the military is not unaware, but I mean, we're building new aircraft carriers, which can be sunk by 1,000 drones, which costs $500,000, and the aircraft carrier costs 60 billion. I mean, we're shooting down $1,000 drones in the Red Sea with $1 million missiles. Yes, we can do that, but eventually, it's a lot cheaper. I mean, I think the Pentagon is, I mean, I credit Eric Schmidt because I think Eric is a genuine patriot who's trying right now to get the military to understand that, this is a whole different world.
Yeah.
I mean, PCs change computing, drones change warfare, because anybody can write the software for a drone. And the Ukrainians too. They have 80 companies who are writing drone software. Uh, and they've shown what they can do with it. So
Yeah. Well,
thank you.
on this happy note, we
Yeah, okay.
bring us to an end, but thanks so much. And we will
We'll
certainly
see you soon.
touch. Thanks so much again, Bill.
Thank you. Bye-bye.